The relationship between US President Donald Trump and German Chancellor Angela Merkel appears to be hardening further today. President Trump doubled down on his comments during the NATO meeting earlier this week by taking to Twitter on his return home and attacking Germany over its trade and spending policies. Chancellor Merkel restated her position that Europe must seek new alliances. Anne Barker has our report.
The latest episode of this transatlantic tit-for-tat began on Twitter, where Donald Trump hit out at Germany's trade surplus and military spending as very bad for the US. He tweeted,
"We have a massive trade deficit with Germany, plus they pay far less than they should on NATO and military. Very bad for US. This will change."
That tweet came after comments by German Chancellor Angela Merkel the day before in a beer tent in Munich, where she lamented that Europe could no longer rely on its traditional close allies, the US and Britain, and must take control of its own destiny. That, in turn, was a response to Donald Trump's comments at the G7 summit at the weekend, where he refused to commit the US to the 2015 Paris Climate Accord to reduce carbon emissions. Now, Germany's Social Democrat leader Martin Schulz has added his own tit-for-tat, accusing Donald Trump of destroying Western values.
Man kann sich der Aufrüstungslogik
When it comes to the ideology of rearmament of Mr. Trump, who's the destroyer of all Western values in a form we've never experienced, he said, a destruction strategy regarding European values, tolerance, respect, cooperation, including between countries based on mutual tolerance and respect. One must stand in the way of such a man with his ideology of rearmament. As the diplomatic row intensifies, both sides are now trying to play down any damage. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer says Donald Trump views Germany as an important ally.
I think the relationship that the president has had with Merkel he would describe as fairly unbelievable. They get along very well. He has a lot of respect for her. They continue to grow the bond that they had during their talks in the G7. And he views not just Germany but the rest of Europe as an important American ally.
And Germany's Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel, who only yesterday accused Donald Trump of weakening the West and putting peace in Europe at risk, now dismisses the row as just a rough patch.
I
think it's becoming trivial, he said. I don't think it's appropriate to communicate by beer tents and Twitter. I believe there are better ways of communicating. It's true the relationship between Germany and the US is difficult, but the US is older and bigger than the current conflict, and that's why I believe we'll return back to a good relationship. Nevertheless, the row appears to have hardened Angela Merkel's resolve that Europe can no longer rely on the US or its traditional close allies. She's used a visit to Berlin by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as evidence that Germany can and will do business without the US. The transatlantic relationship is of enormous importance, she said, and what I said was simply indicating that given the current situation, there are even more reasons for something which is always the case, namely that we in Europe must take our fate in our own hands. For example, we spoke about the European-Indian trade agreement. Europe must be an actor that gets involved on the international stage, and I consider that to be very important. The spat with Germany only adds to the pressure on Donald Trump this week. Overnight, his communications director, Mike Dubke, has quit suddenly without giving a reason. His resignation coincides with expectations that Donald Trump was preparing to shuffle his communications staff to deal with the fallout from allegations his campaign team colluded with Russia during last year's election.
Anne Barker reporting.